Today I'm going to be going over my smallest version of the RX-78. This little guy comes in at an incredible 1/600th scale, and currently he's being held by a 1/60th RX-78. I basically bought this guy a while ago because I wanted a really cool accessory to display with my other RX-78s, and I didn't get around to finishing it until very recently. So, this actually comes as part of a Chibi Kiro Mr. Frog kit. It comes with a tiny Gundam box, a tiny instruction manual, a tiny sprue sheet for your tiny RX-78, and it also does come with a tiny, similar scale Zaku 2. So, to start this out, I cut it out obviously. Afterwards, I applied my panel liner. I applied the panel liner and I applied my paints on the tiny runner that it came with because of the scale. This thing is so darn tiny that if I were to hold any of these pieces with my hand or tweezers, I'd probably mishandle, drop them, something like that. Now, for the color, I actually ended up using a bunch of the Gundam markers that I had bought previously. I'll be honest, I don't love these markers for paint coverage on larger models, but for something tiny like this, I think it works quite well. So I used the yellow from the kit, I used the blue from the Gundam marker kit, as well as the gray. However, when it does come to the red, I did end up using a little bit of Vallejo paint. I really like Vallejo paints when painting small details on models, and I find this red, it pops pretty well, looks pretty good. That said, I'm not the most experienced with miniature paints or painting in general, so this is definitely the smallest thing I painted, and having a good brush definitely came in handy. As you seen earlier, I also did use a pin to paint the really small details, to get in on the eyes, to get in on that little bit of the shield. But for the majority, I was able to get away with using this tiny brush. A good tiny brush should last you a very long time. I've probably got like 4 or 5 good tiny brushes, maybe let's say between the $5 and $15 mark. And while that may seem expensive if you compare them to, the dollar store brushes that you can buy, if you clean these brushes, they work pretty darn well. They've maintained their shape and all that. So, to cut them out from the tiny runner sheet, I actually did use my God Hand single-bladed nippers, just because we're dealing with such a small little figure, and I didn't really want, a larger nipper going in there and perhaps overcutting or maybe, bending the plastic, doing stuff like that. Because this is so tiny, I think that worked out really well, and I did leave the runner a little bit proud, because in most circumstances I find you're going to still want to sand down your nub marks to make them look really good. So I sanded down the nub marks, and then I final assembled this little guy, and wow, is he little. I also did in between, I threw on some clear coat at some point. I threw on some Mr. Hobby flat clear just to kind of give it a little bit more of an even finish. So there it is, complete. And now on to the beauty shots.
You can bring that. I don't wanna speak, fuck with BTB, I'm putting BTC, belt the cheeks. I didn't know myself every day, no, I pray for keeps. My mama niggas can't fuck, watch me spin, on the house. They spend a lot of times, I'm holding on the block.